Welcome back to the Dershow. Lots and lots of news since we last spoke. No, I'm not going to talk about the Alaska Airlines near disaster. Thank God everybody was safe. I don't know anything about that, so that's not within my area of expertise. I am going to talk just briefly about the fact that Israel seems to have changed its tactics somewhat and focusing more on targeted assassinations of Hamas and Hezbollah leaders. It got a major Hamas leader, a major Hezbollah leader. That's exactly what people have been asking Israel to do, what Secretary Blinken, what President Biden, what Israel's critics have said. Move it from ground attack in Gaza to a more targeted attack. But of course, as soon as Israel succeeds in killing one of the heads of Hezbollah, one of the heads of Hamas, oh my God, look what a terrible thing you did. You targeted people for killing. Many of the critics of Israel, for them, nothing Israel does can ever be right. But I've always thought that Israel should be more focused on air attacks using their tremendous technological advantage. They win the high-tech wars, they lose the low-tech wars. And so I hope Israel continues to try to get the leadership of Hamas and pulls back somewhat from its ground attack, which is causing civilian casualties as well as casualties among Israeli soldiers. Also, since last week, the Supreme Court has granted review on an expedited basis in the Colorado case. That's good news. It is inconceivable to me that a court could uphold Colorado or Maine taking Donald Trump off the ballot. That's the most undemocratic thing possible. Back in the 1920s and during the McCarthy period later, conservatives, many right-wing conservatives, were trying to take communists off the ballot. And civil libertarians like me objected to that. But today, people on the left want to take President Trump off the ballot, and I don't think the Supreme Court's going to allow that. Before we get to that, just one more item in the news that I want to mention before we get to Colorado and before we get to the concept of insurrection, and that is finally more information has come out in the Jeffrey Epstein case. As you know, from day one, I called for the unsealing, the unredaction of every single document in the Ghislaine Maxwell versus Gouffre versus Ghislaine Maxwell case. In the first days, some of the information came out, it trickled out. But in the last couple of days, more information has come out, including 2 smoking gun emails, which proved conclusively that I was framed and how I was framed. And we're going to do a show on that. But the new documents prove conclusively how the frame up occurred, and why it occurred, and what the motive was. And there are still unredacted documents there's still redacted documents and still unsealed documents, including an FBI report, a very important FBI report, which I've seen the redacted copy, but not the unredacted copy, tape recordings and other kinds of things. So we filed a motion just the other day in court asking to have everything unsealed, all the material that remains sealed unsealed, because you can't have half truths. What's been unsealed mostly has been accusations, 9-year-old accusations, but the evidence that has come forward disproving the allegations have not been unsealed. As far as I know, it's a matter of public record, but it hasn't even been unsealed that the woman who accused me admitted that she now recognized that she may have mistaken me for somebody else, that it may have been a case of mistaken identification. I want everything out because I didn't do anything wrong. I had sex with one woman since the day I met Jeffrey Epstein until today, my wife, and I proved it and can prove it, and these documents help prove it. So we'll talk about that tomorrow, maybe the next day as well. But let's go back to the Supreme Court in Colorado. There are many key issues in that case. One, probably the one the court will decide the case on, is whether or not states have the authority individually to disqualify somebody on the basis of a state-reached conclusion that that person engaged in or helped an insurrection. So that's one of the issues. Article 5 of the 14th Amendment gives the power to enforce the amendment to Congress. And Congress, in fact, has passed laws defining what an insurrection is. Most states don't have laws defining insurrection. And in Colorado and Maine, in the Colorado case, there was a kind of a judicial hearing. You call it a trial. It wasn't really a trial. And a judge concluded that it was an insurrection on January 6th and that Trump participated in it, and therefore he was automatically, self-enforcingly disqualified from running. It was even worse in Maine, where a single state Secretary of State, who apparently is a radical leftist with a long history, concluded on her own, apparently without taking much evidence or cross-examination, that Trump was guilty of an insurrection. So let's talk a little bit about what an insurrection is, and let's talk about what's going on today throughout the United States. Look at New York, at what recently has occurred. In New York, anti-Israel groups, they call themselves pro-Palestinians. They're not pro-Palestinians. They have nothing to do with wanting things to get better for the Palestinians. They don't favor a two-state solution. They are just completely anti-Israel and anti-American. And the key is that they're anti-American. They are blocking highways. They're denying people access to tunnels during traffic. They're making life miserable for people. Today, a group of them tried to disrupt the speech made by President Biden at a black church in Charleston, South Carolina. They were stopped and ushered out. That's okay. I mean, a speech, fine, there are elements of free speech there, but blocking traffic is not protected by the First Amendment. Blocking access to a train station is not protected by the First Amendment. First Amendment is limited by time, manner, and place limitations. You can't scream and yell and do things in a church, and you can't block access. You can't have a loudspeaker go at 4 a.m, and you can't block access. Blocking access is a crime. It's an act. It can be an expressive act, but the First Amendment doesn't cover it. Now, is it an insurrection? Let's first understand who the people are who were involved. These are not people who care about Palestine. These are not people who care about the people of Palestine. There are some who do. There are some Palestinians who participate in these demonstrations, but the demonstrations are conducted largely by hard left socialist activists whose goal is to overthrow the government of the United States. Their goal, and they say it, is to overthrow free market capitalism, to overthrow the way we elect our presidents, and to substitute a Stalin-type autocracy. That's the goal. In the old days, we would call these people communists. We don't use that term anymore. But the Democratic Socialists of America and the other groups that are organizing these well-organized and well-paid demonstrations have as their goal ultimately the overthrow of the United States and the substitution of our way of life and our democratic government for a different kind of government, the overthrow of the Judeo-Christian tradition and all of those kinds of things. One of the groups is called Jewish Voice for Peace, as I've said before. It's a beard, it's a cover. The Jewish Voice for Peace is not Jewish. Many of its members are not Jewish. They're radical communist socialists, people who want to overthrow the government. And because there are a couple of Jews, and look, Karl Marx was Jewish, and Trotsky was Jewish. You can find Jews everywhere, even among revolutionaries. Because some of the people are Jewish, they adopted the name Jewish Voice for Peace. They're not Jewish. Fortunately, they don't have a voice. They engage in violence, and they're not in favor of peace. They're in favor of destroying Israel. They don't believe in Israel's right to exist at all, certainly not as the nation state of the Jewish people, and they support Hamas, favor Hamas. And many of them justified the Hamas rapes and murders and beheadings. And many of them deny there were any rapes or beheadings. Here, I'll just take an advance on the letters and just read you a letter that came in today. Dershowitz, you're a lying hypocrite. Rapes and beheadings has been totally debunked and actively abandoned by the Israeli government. And you know it, you shit stain. No, I do know it. The Israeli government has produced videotapes of some of the forensics. They clearly have proved that there were rapes and sexual assaults and body mutilations, including beheadings. So no, I'm not making it up. I'm not a lying hypocrite. I'm telling you the truth. But the Jewish Voice for Peace, probably this person is from it, Jewish Voice for Peace takes that position. They're Holocaust deniers, basically. There were people who denied that 6 million Jews were killed during the Holocaust, and now you have people denying that the most outrageous attack on individual Jews since the Holocaust didn't occur. No, we're denying it. It didn't occur. The people from Hamas came over with picnic baskets. They actually wanted to join the peace concert and were singing Kumbaya and Shalom, Shalom. Didn't you see it? Don't you know that? That's what actually happened. That's what Jewish Voice for Peace and this hypocrite named Guido One said. But of course, there's no truth to that. We know for sure that there were multiple rapes, multiple abuses. The bodies were torn apart, beheadings, limbs. I don't even want to get into it. It was so horrible. Both the New York Times, which is certainly not favorable to Israel, and the Wall Street Journal documented the rapes in great detail. And Israel is certainly never, as this letter says, abandoned by the Israeli government. It's just a lie. But liars can write to me, and I'll answer them, and I'll answer the letters when the time comes. But these demonstrations are not about Palestine. Let's be very clear about that. They are anti-Israel, anti-American, anti-Western democracy, anti-free market economy, anti the Judeo-Christian tradition, and could fit comfortably into the legal definition of insurrection, which I will read for you in 1 second. It's anyone who so hinders the execution of the laws of that state and of the United States within that state that any part or class of its people is deprived of a right, privilege, immunity, or protection named in the Constitution and secured by law, and the constituted authorities of that state are unable, fail, or refuse to protect that right, privilege, or immunity, or give that protection, or opposes or obstructs the execution of the laws of the United States, or impedes the course of justice under these laws. Under that definition, and that's one definition under Section 333, there are other definitions of insurrection and rebellion and all of that. But what's going on in the streets today are as much of an insurrection as the claimed insurrection of January 6th. They are protests, and the protests have become violent. In January 6th, there were successful attempts to go into the House and disrupt proceedings. And the events that are occurring now, they're an attempt to disrupt proceedings and disrupt the right of people to travel. If you go to Penn Station or Grand Central Station, or try to go home to your family to have dinner over the Brooklyn Bridge and the Manhattan Bridge or the 59th Street Bridge or whatever bridge there is, Williamsburg Bridge, and you're prevented from doing so, it seems to me that obstructs the execution of the laws, and that deprives citizens of a right, privilege, or immunity, the right to travel, the right to join your family, the right to be home. I'm not making the case that either way that this is or is not an insurrection, but I'm saying I find it not easy to distinguish what's going on in New York today and what went on the West Coast after the Black Lives Matter demonstrations, took over courthouses, blocked access to state and federal courthouses, blocked access to whole neighborhoods and streets. How is that different from what happened on January 6th? In both cases, there was a protest. On January 6th, the protest was against what people regarded as an unfair election. I don't agree with them, but that's not what the First Amendment is about. They had the right to gather together and express their views and seek redress from their government. That's what they did on January 6th. That's what the Black Lives Matters did after the killing of George Floyd. And that's presumably what these radical insurrectionists, they would tell you probably they're insurrectionists. They'd probably claim it. That doesn't mean it's true. But it does mean that you can't have a double standard. You have to ask yourself the question, why is that case different than the January 6th case? Of course, one involves a federal election, but that's not the issue. The issue is, was either, both, or neither of them an attempt to deprive people of right or privilege, immunity or protection of the Constitution or the laws? And they both seemed equally designed to do it. I mean, the anti-Israel, anti-American protests we're seeing now in the bridges and train stations and other areas are designed to stop people from exercising their rights. Or what's going on in colleges and universities is a story of a young woman who's a student at NYU, and she can't go to class. She can't walk the streets. She's terrified. And then you have this woman who was the valedictorian at City University of New York Law School a couple of years ago. She, in New York, makes a speech in which she calls for death. Death. That's not protest. That's incitement. She calls for death of Zionism in her neighborhood. Now, she says Zionism, not Zionists, but you can't have death to Zionism. You can only have death to Zionists. And she's calling for people to impose death on Zionists in our neighborhoods. Boy, that comes awfully close to an incitement to violence, because obviously the people in the audience don't know the difference between a Zionist and a Jew. Not all Jews are Zionists, not all Zionists are Jews, obviously, but an awfully large number of Jews believe in Israel's right to exist, and that's all you need to believe in to be a Zionist. A Zionist doesn't mean you support the Israeli government, or you support Netanyahu, or you even support what Israel is doing in the war, anything like that. All being a Zionist means is that you think that the Jewish people have the right to have a nation state of their own, just like the French people and the Chinese people and the Arab people of Jordan and Saudi Arabia have the right to have a nation of their own. So do the Jewish people. That's all that Zionism is. And when you call for the death in our neighborhoods of Zionism, you're calling for violence. Now, is it just advocacy or incitement? That's a line that's awfully hard to draw. I probably would defend her right to make that speech if she were prosecuted and claimed a free speech right. It'd be a close question, but there's a plausible case. And there's also a plausible case that she might have crossed the line by talking about death in the neighborhood. But the point is, too, that these are acts that could easily be classified as insurrectionary. That's what's so dangerous about the Colorado case and the case in Maine, that the concept of insurrection, rebellion, are so broad and so elastic and so accordion-like that they can be stretched to include conduct you don't like and exclude conduct you do like. That is not the basis either for criminal prosecution, and certainly not the basis for disqualifying a person who may get 45%, who knows? I hope not more, but that's my own view, who may get close to half of the votes of Americans. He never got more than half the votes either time that he ran previously. Obviously, he won the first time by having a majority of the electoral college. He didn't have a majority of the actual votes. And the second time, he was overwhelmingly defeated by the popular votes, and also overwhelmingly defeated by the electoral votes, although some of the states were close enough so that if there were a shift in thousands of votes here or there, maybe it could have been a different result. But in any event, he is a man who has the voting support of millions and millions of Americans. And the idea that a Secretary of State or 4 judges in a 4-3 vote, all 7 of them appointed by Democratic governors, should be able to deny Republicans or independents or even some Democrats the right to vote for Donald Trump is so undemocratic. Conservatives tried to do that in the 1920s and the 1930s and during McCarthyism to communists. And some countries in the world do prohibit communists from running. In the United States, they were prohibited from running for a period of time. And we civil libertarians oppose that. And we civil libertarians, I would hope, would oppose trying to take Donald Trump off the ballot as well. So I'm going to make a prediction. I'm careful with my predictions because I want to have a 100% voting record. So far, it's been that way. I predicted the Supreme Court would review the case. I predicted that President Gay, if there were any more allegations, serious allegations of plagiarism, would probably have to leave. So I'm going to make a prediction. The Supreme Court will reverse the Colorado case. If they take the main case, they will also reverse the main case. And what I won't predict is the vote. I would hope it would be a 9-0 vote. I would think that would help unite the country, but there's certainly a possibility that 1, 2, or 3, I can't imagine any more than that, would vote to keep take Trump off the ballot. I don't think 3 people will vote that way. I don't think that that will be the case, but we'll wait and see. So that's my judgment. It's always I say to you, I don't ever confuse my judgment with what I wish for, but in this case, I wish for that too. I don't want Trump to be taken off the ballot. I don't want him to have any excuse for saying that he was improperly denied election. I want him to be defeated fair and square by an overwhelming majority vote, largely because of what he said about democracy and dictatorship. I understand that may have been said in humor, it may have been said in anger, but it worries me a lot when a man running for president says he'll be dictator just on the first day and not after that. But there are a lot of reasons that I'm worried about a Trump presidency, but it might happen. And if it does, we'll live with it. And our system of checks and balances will prevent tyranny from occurring in this country, in my view, I hope. But I sure hope the Supreme Court does the right thing. I think it will do the right thing. And the question is by what numbers? I hope it's 9-0. All right, stay tuned. We'll wait and see. It's not long in coming because the court has set argument for February. And I think in a case like this, like in Bush versus Gore, the decision will come shortly thereafter. I'm hoping it's a relatively short decision by the Chief Justice for the entire court. But if it's not, then you'll have, if there are 9 justices, you might have 9 decisions in a case like this. So we'll wait and see. Okay, I already read one letter. Let's look at some other letters. I hope they're a little bit more honest than the letter that I read. Okay. You're not guilty by association. You were literally named as participating. Yes, I was, by a woman who then said that she now recognizes that she might have mistaken me for somebody else, and it might have been a case of mistaken identification. So it's worse than guilt by association. It's innocence. And of course, I didn't do anything improper. But there are a lot of letters that seem to suggest that maybe I did. You knew about the girls. No, I didn't. Neither did President Lawrence Summers of Harvard, neither did Nobel Prize scientists who went to seminars with him. I found out about it when I was his lawyer, and I represent him. Got him a sweetheart deal. Well, he didn't think it was a sweetheart deal. He wouldn't pay me my fee because he thought it was a terrible deal because he had to go to jail and he had to register as a sex offender. Why would you want to associate? Well, I didn't associate with him once I found out about the allegations. I was just his lawyer. I think his doctor also stayed with him. His accountant probably stayed with him. That's what professionals do, and certainly lawyers do, because your job is to defend them. Professor Dr. Michael Bowden, the famed pathologist, says he observed the autopsy of Jeffrey Epstein and said the injuries indicate he was murdered and did not commit suicide. Combining that with the other irregularities like missing videos and missing guards, does not a full nonpartisan investigation need to be launched? Absolutely. Of course, there should be a full, complete nonpartisan investigation, and the chips will fall where they may. My own suspicion, I don't have any special knowledge of this except that I knew Epstein, the idea of him spending the rest of his life in rat-infested jails or prisons is not something that I think he could deal with. He was pretty much a hedonist. He liked his pleasures, but he couldn't have committed suicide without the help of some people. So my belief is that probably, not certainly, but probably he committed suicide. And certainly I think he had help from the guards. I think he probably paid them off, turned off the television cameras, made sure there was nobody else in his cell who could stop him from committing suicide. So I do think an investigation is warranted. I wish you'd admit publicly that you were wrong to ever defend him. No, I'm going to wait for John Adams to admit publicly that he was wrong in defending the people who were accused of the Boston Massacre, or Abraham Lincoln to admit that he was wrong when he defended people accused of horrible, horrible crimes. This letter says he agrees I should defend people on the First Amendment, but not people who might be guilty of a crime. Now, that's not my philosophy. I'll defend people who are charged with crimes. They all deserve a defense, and I'll do the best defense I can, consistent with legal ethics. I won't violate legal ethics. I won't allow a person who I think might be guilty to take the witness stand. And then, get these letters. You raped minors. Were they just goyim to you? Nasty fuck. Follow the evidence. Follow the evidence. I never saw a minor with Jeffrey Epstein. I never touched a minor. You can believe what you want to believe. And I have no idea what the ethnicity is of any of the people who were Epstein victims. But again, let me say that I did no wrong whatsoever. And I'm proud of the fact that I continue to represent the most unpopular, the most despised, and the most hated people, including people you hate. And I'm going to continue to defend them. And I'm also going to defend people you like and that other people hate. And they will hate me for defending people you like. That's the way it works in our legal system. And that's the way I'm going to continue to operate as long as the good Lord gives me the strength and the power to do what lawyers should do under the Sixth Amendment to the Constitution. If you don't like that system, I got a perfect system for you. It's called Iran and the mullahs. There, guilty people aren't defended, neither are innocent people, but nobody's defended. Or if you want to do a slightly better system, go to China or go to Russia. But if you really love America, you have to love the Constitution. And if you love the Constitution, that includes the Sixth Amendment. And that includes the right of every defendant to have the right to counsel. And if I won't represent people under the Sixth Amendment, how can I ask other people to do it? So I'm going to continue to do it. See you tomorrow.